Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to, instead of being a retrospective series on the last week's Parsha, some other timely idea, we're now going to change our focus to becoming more of a prospective Torah thought. And also some stuff about the timely, things going on in the Jewish calendar. So the Parsha we're going to read this coming Shabbos is Parshat Shelach. And this is the Parsha that includes the uncomfortable situation where the Jewish people are told by God, sorry, you won't be able to enter the land of Israel, but your kids will. Why? Because you followed, you believed, you changed your whole perspective on the land of Israel based on the report of the infamous spies. But not only do we learn a lesson about not speaking slander, not creating a false report about Lashon Hara and spreading gossip and so on from this, although that is a very important lesson, particularly in the age of microblogging and texting and tweeting and vlogs and OGs and other things that are going on throughout the internet. But there's a deeper lesson that we can learn about ourselves that's kind of nestled within the account of the spies. In chapter 13, verse 33, Perek Yud Gimel, Pasuk Lamed Gimel, we hear the perspective of the spies relaying their experience in the land of Israel. And they say the following, it says, V'shamra, and there we saw as Hanaphilim, these great giants walking around. Bnei Anak min Hanaphilim, they were sons of the giant from among the Nephilim, this was their lineage. Vanahi ve'einenu kechagavim, and we saw in our own eyes that we were like grasshoppers. V'chein hayinu be'eineihem, and so too were we in theirs. The idea the spies are trying to convey was that these people are huge, they're giants, they're so much bigger than us, we're never going to be able to conquer them. And there's a lot of insight that we can detect from a psychological perspective, say that 3 times fast, in their statement. We looked like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so too we were in theirs. There's a concept in the Talmud called the svek sveka, a double doubt. Usually when you have a double doubt, the two doubts cancel each other out, and you're left with what's considered to be a clear path to follow. So we have two doubts that we can detect in their statement. Number one, who says that the residents of the land of Israel at the time were saying, oh, look at these grasshoppers? There are those who have the perspective of just a simple interpretation, simple reading of the text does not indicate that was a statement that they heard. So that's doubt number one. That's suffix number one. Doubt number two, who says that the opinion of these residents matters? Why are these spies, who were no lowlifes, they were some of the elite of the Jewish people at the time, why are they taking seriously the opinions of the people they were going to conquer? Right? To put an analogy in American history, people didn't necessarily care what the opinion of the Native American was before they drove them into Oklahoma. Being in St. Louis, we're now close to Oklahoma. It's that thing that has that weird shape, right? That most of it's actually an Indian reservation, believe it or not. Funny things happen when you're in the Midwest. Anyway, so who said that their opinion matters? On the one hand, we have a question as to did the giants actually make that statement? Number one. Number two, since when does their opinion matters? Based on Talmudic logic, these Torah scholars who went to view the land should have said, you know what? Maybe we heard this, maybe this is what we're thinking, but you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But from a psychological perspective, we can get a tremendous insight into how these spies felt. They felt inadequate. They felt that they couldn't do it. They felt we are not capable of this mission of conquering the land of Canaan, which would be the land of Israel. We don't have the ability to make God's guarantee happen. It's just, we're like grasshoppers. We're like teeny weeny little, and these are all these giants. How are we going to be able to do it? That was the core failure of the spies. because they were viewing themselves as to who they might have been. Granted, the Jewish people were a nation of slaves for over a couple hundred years. And they had basically just left Egypt, and they were now learning how to be free people. Granted, they didn't have the best self-esteem. I mean, it's a little hard to look at the statement that V'nehi ve'einenu kechagavim, that we were in our eyes like grasshoppers, to be a positive statement about their own self-efficacy. That's clear. The problem was that they didn't see that it didn't matter what they thought, but it mattered what God thought. And God had guaranteed that the Jewish people were going to inherit the land of Israel, that was their legacy as promised to the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and this promise had been repeated over and over and over again. God was serious it was going to happen. And thank God, we've seen this guarantee fulfilled in our generations. 1948, the Jewish people had sovereignty over the land of Israel. It never seems to have entered the spy's mind, based on this verse, that they were able to do it. And you know what? Maybe they couldn't. But God can make anything happen. This was a generation that saw the splitting of the sea. They saw all the plagues. This generation should have put two and two together and saying, you know what? Maybe we might not have been able to do it. But with God at our side, this is something that we can undertake. This is something that we will be successful in because God's guaranteed that it will happen. If we only believe in God and believe in our God-given capabilities, there is no telling what we can accomplish. There is no telling the depths of our character that we can refine. There's no telling the heroism that we can undertake to make our world a better place. And there's no telling how close to God we can be if we only believe that that is something that God will help us to achieve. Have a great week.